Have you ever promised yourself, this is the last time? The last time you would lose your temper. The last time you would return to the same habit. The last time you would become the person you no longer wanted to be. Yet somehow you did it again. At first you tell yourself, next time will be different. But after enough failures, another thought quietly takes its place. Maybe this is just who I am. More than 100 years ago, one man reached exactly that place. He had talent, success, fame, but he no longer believed he could change himself. His name was Girish Chandra Ghosh. Calcutta knew Girish Chandra Ghosh as a remarkable man, a playwright, an actor, a theatre pioneer. When his plays opened, people filled the halls. His words could make audiences laugh, weep, and sit in stunned silence. He understood people. He understood emotion. He understood the human heart. Yet, there was one person he never seemed to understand: himself. Away from the applause, another life was unfolding, one marked by heavy drinking, reckless living, and promises that rarely survived the next day. He wasn't proud of it. He knew exactly what he was doing to himself, but knowing didn't seem to help. The more he tried to change, the more impossible it began to feel. By then, Girish had begun hearing about an unusual priest at Dakshineswar. Some called him a saint. Others thought he was simply mad. Curiosity finally took him there. When Girish arrived, evening had already fallen. The lamp in the room was lit, and Ramakrishna was sitting in a strange, half-conscious state, absorbed in something Girish could not understand. Then suddenly he asked, "Has evening come?" Someone answered him. But a little later he asked again, "Has evening come?" The lamp was burning. Everyone in the room knew it was evening. Yet Ramakrishna seemed unaware of the ordinary world around him. Girish watched and watched. Was this the holy man everyone had been talking about? He left unconvinced. And yet, his first meeting with Ramakrishna did not end there. Their paths kept crossing, sometimes at a devotee's home, sometimes among people singing around Ramakrishna, sometimes in places Girish never expected. Each meeting left him a little more puzzled. This man never seemed interested in impressing anyone. He never argued, never claimed superiority. And once, when Ramakrishna came to the Star Theatre, Girish greeted him with a respectful bow. To his surprise, Ramakrishna immediately bowed back. Girish bowed again. So did Ramakrishna. Back and forth they went until Girish almost laughed. Who was this man who refused to stand above anyone? For reasons he could not explain, Girish kept returning. Not because his doubts had disappeared, but because he had never met anyone quite like Ramakrishna. By now, Girish had met Ramakrishna several times. Girish still wasn't a saint. He still drank. He still lived the same restless life. But something had changed. Around Ramakrishna, he no longer felt the need to pretend. One day, during a conversation, Girish finally asked, what spiritual practice should he follow? Ramakrishna said gently, "Remember God every morning and evening." It sounded simple. For most people, it would have been. But Girish remained silent. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry, I may forget." He knew himself too well. He had made promises before. None of them had lasted. Ramakrishna smiled. Very well. Then remember God just before you eat or sleep, no matter what time of the day it is. Girish shook his head and said, I can't promise even that. I don't know what I will remember when I wake up in the morning. He wasn't being evasive. He was being the one thing he always was, honest. The room fell silent. No one expected such an answer. No one except Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna did not rebuke him. He did not say, you lack discipline. He did not ask him to try harder. Instead, he said something Girish had never heard before. All right then, give me your power of attorney. From this moment on, I will take your full responsibility. You won't have to do anything at all. No conditions, no bargain, no demand that Girish first become worthy. Only complete acceptance. For years, Girish had believed the burden was his alone. That if he failed, it was because he had failed to change himself. Now for the first time, someone offered to carry that burden. No argument followed. No great philosophical discussion. Only silence. And somewhere within that silence, something began to loosen. Girish walked away that day with an unexpected feeling. Relief. No impossible vows. No rules to follow. No promises he already knew he could not keep. Only one simple act. He had placed the responsibility in Ramakrishna's hands. For the first time in years, he felt free. In fact, he thought he had found a loophole. He thought he could have Ramakrishna and his own vices too. He was wrong. A few days later, Girish picked up a bottle. He poured himself a drink. Then he looked into the glass. The master's face looked back at him. His hand froze. Slowly, he put the glass down. On another day, he walked towards the familiar streets where he had so often sought escape. He reached the door. Then quietly, he turned back. No one had stopped him. No one had forbidden him. Ramakrishna had given him no rules, and yet he found himself unable to live as he once had. It wasn't fear. It wasn't obligation. It was something far deeper. The burden had shifted. He was no longer trying to save himself. Sometime later, while speaking with Ramakrishna, Girish said casually, I shall do this. The master corrected him gently. No, you cannot speak that way anymore. You say, if God wills, I shall do it. It sounded like a small correction. To Girish, it changed the way he lived. Years later, he would say, I do not have the freedom even to breathe outside what I have already surrendered. He did not say it as a man who had lost his freedom. He said it as a man who had finally stopped carrying his life alone. The meeting ended, but Girish's story didn't. For years, he had believed that the problem was his lack of willpower. So he kept making promises and kept breaking them. Ramakrishna never asked him to make one more promise. He simply asked him to hand over the burden he had been carrying alone. We may never meet a Ramakrishna. We may never walk through the streets of 19th century Calcutta. But we all know what it feels like to disappoint ourselves, to wake up believing today will be different, and to go to sleep wondering, why am I still the same? Girish asked that question for years. And then one day, he stopped asking it. Not because he found the answer, but because he had finally found someone who was willing to carry the burden for him.
If this reflection resonated with you, you may subscribe to this channel to explore more timeless wisdom here, not as stories of the past, but as mirrors for our own lives. Om Tat Sat.